And blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning here at KIDO Talk Radio. We're joined by our great friend Lars Larson. You can catch him weeknights 6 to 9 on KIDO Talk Radio and across the country, around the world. Lars, thank you for joining us.
It's always my pleasure, Kevin. How are you?
Anxious to see and to hear your review and commentary on what people are buzzing about this Michelle Wolf issue.
Well, I will admit, I have a friend who works here at the company who managed to wangle an invitation. He was going as a guest of CBS News, and I thought, well, that ought to be interesting. I watched about half of Michelle Wolf's supposed comedy routine. I watched the video replay that was available on YouTube. She wasn't funny, and let's start with that. You can get away with a tremendous amount as a comedian if you're funny, and we know this because over the years, we've seen some brilliant performers. I mean, Eddie Murphy, Chris Rock, all kinds of people who have really pushed the edges if you're funny. She wasn't funny. It came off to me as mean-spirited, especially, I guess Donald Trump can take his lumps. He ran for the job. I admire the man. But if you want to tell jokes about him, fine. But make it funny. But this woman went on to attack people like Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who's merely an employee at the White House and the spokeswoman for the president, in a way that just didn't have any humor to it. It was all just, if you're associated with Donald Trump, we're going to attack you. And I got about halfway through it and thought, I'm never going to get those 10 minutes back in my life, so I stopped. But I thought that it was really out of character to the point where now, even the White House Correspondents Association, which, as you know, Kevin, is made up of members who despise this president, and even they have decided that her speech was over the top or her comedy routine was over the top, and they've said that it wasn't appropriate. And I know that when you invite somebody who's a comedian to come on, you kind of have to take whatever if you understand who they are and the kind of routines they've done before, you understand you're going to get some humor that maybe has a sharp edge to it. This was sharp edge without the humor, in my view.
Well, and to attack Sarah Sanders and Kellyanne Conway and others personally, Lars, that's just not appropriate.
Well, when she tells a story and says, you know how they tell the story of the tree falls in the forest, how do we arrange to have Kellyanne Conway under the tree? Ha ha. Yeah, I think, Kevin, there are 10-year-olds in your audience who are getting ready for school this morning who could tell a better joke, who could be funnier than that. And this woman is in front of, the press corps that covers the White House. You'd think that with that kind of stage, you'd come prepared to be hilarious. And she wasn't. And it really, in fact, what would be great is if she had based some of the humor. Humor is all about exaggeration, and my wife will tell you I am not funny. I don't try to be a comedian because I'm not funny, but I know it's about exaggeration. So if you want to exaggerate some things about the president, go for it. There's lots of material there. There's also lots of material in the former administration, in Hillary Clinton. A lot of us joke about how differently this press corps treats this president than it did the last president. The last president was a big slobbering love affair between the president and the press, although I think it was more one-sided. I think Obama saw the press as a tool. The press saw Obama as the man who literally, some of them suggested, walks on water or sends a tingle up their leg. And there was plenty of opportunity for that, but she didn't do that. She stuck to let's bash the president and anybody connected to him. And let me tell you where the danger to democracy is. This is why I'm not funny, because I'm too serious about it. These people whose job it is to inform us as to what the president is doing have turned into advocates, people like Jim Acosta, that go on the attack every day. If their job is to be in Washington, D.C., to go to the White House daily briefing, to talk to various people and report the news, that's one thing. I don't know that any of their bosses said to them, your job is to go out and find every single thing you can to dig at the president about. The danger to democracy is, I'll give you a specific example from last week. Rear Admiral Ronnie Jackson, who's been the White House physician. He's a United States Navy admiral. He didn't get to that position without being a smart and capable person. The president put him up for VA secretary. He has now been, his reputation has now been thoroughly soiled by what's happened. There are even some who suggest he may not be able to hang on to the job as the White House doctor, and he had to pull his name out of consideration as the VA secretary. And why? Because of reports of information that we now know, according to the Washington Post, a left-leaning newspaper owned by Jeff Bezos of Amazon. The paper now confirms the most serious allegations against him that were made, that were used to besmirch his reputation, are not true. But it doesn't matter if they're true, because, and I'll warn your audience to be watchful for this, we've entered an era where if you're associated with Trump, they will try to destroy you with information that is either false or true. The false stuff is actually easier. I mean, you could make up stories about me all day long, Kevin. And if I said, well, those aren't true, oh, that's exactly what we'd expect you to say, Lars. So that the fact that you're denying it probably makes us more convinced that it is true. And I say, but you're destroying my reputation. You have no proof. And you say, well, you get a chance for your day in court. Well, Admiral Ronnie Jackson, we now know, didn't do the things he was accused of doing, but it's too late because the bell has already been rung and you can't unring it. And he's already missed out on the VA secretary position. And probably tens of millions of Americans will say, oh, yeah, that's that admiral used to be the White House physician. He's the one who got drunk on the job and passed out pharmaceuticals like he was some street corner drug dealer. That's the part they'll remember. Will they remember the Saturday morning headline in the Washington Post that says, these things said about Ronnie Jackson were not true?
Our great friend Lars Larson joining us here at KIDO Talk Radio. Catch him weeknights 6 to 9. So, Lars, interesting, and we were talking to John Decker earlier, who's a board member of the White House Correspondents' Dinner, was next to Sarah Sanders, and he said, it was the president was counter-programming, and it really shows you the two Americas. You've got the swamp, and then you've got the president in Washington, Michigan. Yeah,
and what's crazy is that people, I guess, think the president should go there and get punched around for no good reason by a bunch of people. It's one thing if you say we have this professional relationship. You are reporters. You cover me. I'm the president. You're reacting to the news that I create. And let's have an evening when everybody can share some laughs, little self-deprecating humor, and maybe even some barbed humor. That's not what this was. And I think it really presents a danger to democracy. I'm not exaggerating because, remember, most of what you or I know about what's going on in Washington, D.C. is based on what gets reported out of there. And if the majority of reporters say the president is crazy, the president is dangerous, and that's reported widely, you and I can tell our audiences all day long that we don't think that's true, and here's the evidence to the contrary. But remember, we may be talking to 10% of the country. The other 90% gets its news primarily from the biased and left-wing media. And it would be, I even think it would be fantastic if America went back to when we had battling sides in journalism. We had, in, say, the William Randolph Hearst era, we had newspapers that identified as Republican, newspapers that identified as Democrat. But the fact was you could read one newspaper, get their take back in the day before there was a lot of electronic media. There was a little bit of radio, no television at all in those days. And you could read the other one, and somewhere in the middle, you probably got the truth. These days, other than conservative talk radio and a little bit of Internet, there isn't much conservative media out there, which means that the only information people, voters, citizens are getting is biased in one direction. I can tell you, and I've used this as an example, Kevin, but imagine this. If there's a new person hired here at the radio station that's our flagship station in Portland, if I go home every night for the next 6 months and tell my wife, oh, this person's terrible. They hired this Kevin Miller guy, and he's terrible. He's a slob. He's rude. He's crude. I wouldn't say that about you, Kevin, but I'm just using you as a handy example. 6 months from now, we're at some get-together, and she meets Kevin Miller. What is her opinion of him going to be? It's going to be based on whatever is the only information she's had on you. And if what I've been telling her every night is you're just a terrible, creepy guy, then That's what she's going to think. She has no other point of contact. And that's where the American people are. We have to depend on journalists to tell us the real truth and give us both sides. And they're not doing that right now. And that means that when you go to cast ballots this fall, you may cast ballots based on a whole bunch of really bad information.
Our great friend Lars Larson joining us here. Kevin Miller in the morning at KIDO Talk Radio. Lars, the president's had some historic breakthroughs, and one thing that we love about your program is that you give us not only the opinions, the newsmakers, but perspective. What do you make of the Korea situation?
Oh, I think this is fantastic, and I'm waiting. There is going to come a point where the media is going to have no choice but to say, this president that we were saying just literally a couple of months ago is a warmonger. He is going to take us to war with Russia. He's going to take us to war in Syria. He's going to take us, just complete, put in a name of a different country, and you'll have all the headlines. This man may make an absolutely historic breakthrough with both Koreas and help to have catalyzed. You remember in physics or chemistry when they'd say, what is a catalyst? A catalyst is a chemical or a thing that you insert into a chemical equation that causes the chemistry to happen. Now, 25 years of American presidents, including Republicans like George Herbert Walker Bush and George W. Bush, and Democrats like Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, have failed to get anywhere at all with North Korea. Today, we're on the cusp of an agreement to not only end the Korean War, two-thirds of a century. Remember, the war has never ended. It's
right.
An armistice between North and South. But to end the war, perhaps, to get a non-nuclear Korean peninsula, both South and North, to be able to open up Korea in a way that might actually lead to prosperity for the Korean people, that might lead to, more importantly, greater security for the American people. This president made that happen. And I don't know if anybody, someone out there will try to say it was Barack Obama that made this happen, but he had 8 years and he got nothing done with North Korea. This president hasn't even been in office for 18 months, and already things are happening. And some of it is because, I think, of his style. His style has been bellicose and belligerent and America first, and I love it. But there are people who say, no, you can't insult foreign leaders like he did with Kim Jong-un. You can't be belligerent and say, if you don't get to the table and work with us, we will, if we have to, destroy you. You can't talk that way. Well, he did, and look what the result is. Now, if somebody wants to tell me that, no, we could have got there with the pleasant diplomacy of John Kerry, who in my mind is just about a giant waste of oxygen. So this guy couldn't get anywhere with North Korea. And by the way, you're going to see an embassy open up in Jerusalem. People said, if you do that, it'll be so provocative, people will die. No, actually, it might bring people to the table. When you finally have a player in the room, the catalyst, who is President Trump, who says, we're going to do things differently than we've ever done them before. And he starts doing it, and it drives the media nuts. It is going have you ever seen one of those movies, like a Jim Carrey movie, where the guy can't say, I'm sorry?
Right.
And Carrey's kind of a creepy guy lately, but he says, I'm sorry, because he can't say I'm sorry. What is going to happen when the words stick in the throats of all those television reporters who've been telling you how dangerous Donald Trump is, who will tell you that he's a warmonger, that all he's going to, and that hiring John Bolton is terrible, or hiring, a different Secretary of State and Mike Pompeo. Well, this president is changing the equation, what fancy people call the dominant paradigm. We've been in a paradigm for the last 25 years where we talk to North Korea and we say, you better not build nukes, and they say, yeah, and they build nukes. You better not build missiles, and they build missiles. So now we've hit a point where things are different, and the results are coming fast. If this is where Donald Trump got after 18 months, think where he's going to get after 6 or 7 years in the second term.
Our great friend Lars Larson. Lars, we'll catch you tonight. Always appreciate you. Any special projects you're up to? I know you're always traveling or getting ready to travel.
Oh, thank goodness. I am able to stay home, enjoy a little time with my 2-year-old granddaughter, who is, by the way, despite anything your audience might tell you, She is simply the most beautiful and wonderful granddaughter on planet Earth. There's no one that even comes close to her. And she is she's so much fun. And she's now 2 years and almost 1 month. And she is just growing like a weed, 36.5 inches tall.
Wow.
I couldn't be prouder of her. Although this morning I'm going to do an interview with the BBC. They're doing a television documentary about one of, I don't want to say favorite, but the most in a negative way, memorable murder cases I ever covered involving Diane Downs, who tried to murder all 3 of her children. And out of love for a man who apparently she thought she could get him back if she just, murdered her kids. And they've decided to do a documentary. It's been almost 35 years since the crime, so they're coming by to talk to me. So that's the only project I'm working on today, other than the radio shows.
Lars, we appreciate you. We'll catch you on Facebook, LarsLarson.com, Lars Larson Show, and, of course, at KIDO Talk Radio.
Always my pleasure, Kevin. Take care.
Thank you, Lars. Bye-bye. Coming up next, your thoughts on what Lars had to say about the president bringing peace to Korea, and yet there's no peace in Washington. We'll try and make it happen. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
You helped create this monster, and now you're profiting off of him. And if you're going to profit off of Trump, you should at least give him some money because he doesn't have any.
That's the scene at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. That's what we're talking about now. Kevin Miller in the morning at KIDO Talk Radio. To Liberal Steve. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. Miller in the morning, like mustard on French fries. I'll tell you, what is America so wound up so tight? I mean, golly, like Dwight was wound up so tight. I mean, if he let go, he'd unwind so fast he'd fly around the universe. Come on, it was a roast. It was poke fun, and Trump wasn't there to poke fun at, so they poked fun at Sarah, and Sarah laughed. Sarah thought it was funny. Sarah's a good gal. Come on, it would be like roasting Miller, talking about Miller and this and that. For Lars Larson, I'd never roast Lars Larson. That guy's, to me, Larson's is a loser. I'm sorry. You're way above his scale, and how he ranks 18 or 19 on the 100 most talk show hosts in America. You should be like number 10 there, Kevin. Come on.
But you know something? I'm not, and I think Lars does a great job, and you and I will agree to disagree.
Well, yeah, he does a great job, but he don't do as good a job as you. And he's made some controversial statements over the years that he's lucky to be where he's at. If he wasn't good in debate when he was in high school, he was a timber kid. His wife, I think, was in radio, and his second wife, Tina, was in radio. That he married in '97. Yeah, I follow all these people. They all got the things. And Sarah, being a Huckabee, she's been with the muckety mucks. You know that East Coast stuff, Kevin. They're hardcore. They nothing bothers them. And why?
Well, I think it does.
Oh no! Come on now, Kevin. Be honest. You're an East Coaster. They're hard as rocks. Really.
So you're saying it was okay for Michelle Wolf to basically say this?
We are graced with Sarah's presence tonight. I have to say I'm a little starstruck. I love you as Aunt Lydia on The Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, that was funny. Yes, it was hilarious. Whatever happened to America laughing? I mean, look at Dean Martin and all those guys that used to roast people, and who's that other guy, the bald-headed guy that used to just tear people apart? Don Rickles.
Don Rickles, God rest his soul.
Can you imagine what Don Rickles would have had to say? They would have had to bleep half of it. We've gotten soft. We really have gotten soft. And you're right, Kevin. You are very right when you say America men have been, nipped. Nobody can laugh anymore. Everybody's uptight. We got the Me Too movement, which is good in certain ways, but there's a lot of it that's just a bunch of poo-poo. Just a minute. Let me put in my diary. Somebody said something to me today that really hurt my feelings, and I didn't slap them or nothing. Come on. We are getting way off base here as Americans. You stay fired up, Miller, and it was funny. And Tea Party Bob, lay off Christie, would you? You and I both know that she can go after 58-year-old men as old cronies because she's a good-looking babe. Get away. That's just the way it is. I hope it doesn't fire both. Some countries it does. I know, Kevin. I don't know what to do as a liberal. I really don't anymore.
You libs need to get a sense of humor.
I want to give Trump big kudos, though. Big. He should definitely, you can quote this from Liberal Steve. Liberal Steve thinks Trump ought to get the Nobel Prize, Peace Prize, for what he accomplished in North Korea. Period.
All right. Thank you, Liberal Steve.
You stay fired up, not Liberal Miller.
Traffic and weather together at KI. Quickly to Joe in Meridian with Kevin Miller at KIDO Talk Radio. Hello, Joe.
Hey, Kevin. How are you doing this morning?
Anxious to hear what you have to say, brother.
Hey, well, I wanted to talk with you a little bit and maybe kind of track how this might impact down the road the infringement of personal liberties that happened with the raid on Trump's attorney. And I've just been thinking about that a lot. And I kind of feel like that puts a lot of us at risk in any kind of allegation or suit, kind of like Lars Larson was talking about. When you go to your attorney and you want to talk about things that are happening, if someone can go in and raid that person without due process or for reasons that aren't, sound, and just get a court order, that really changes things for people's personal liberties. And it's not just, a political thing with the president. I think that is a huge jump in removing personal liberties in our country. And I feel like it's kind of getting washed underneath the rug a little bit. People are like, oh, yeah, whatever, it's just gamesmanship. But I think it has some precedent potential there, and I was curious what your thoughts are.
Well, to seeing what the Obama administration did when they weaponized the IRS, the NSA, the Attorney General's Office, the Justice Department against us, and those guys haven't been held accountable. And to quote what Rand Paul said to Sean Hannity, if they can do this to a president, what can they do to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty scary. And at the end of the day, does that mean that, you're not going to want to talk to your attorney about things? Well, that's the whole point of having an attorney, one. And then secondly, if that's going to be a problem or an issue and you're going to have to fight not only against the case but also against infringement of your personal liberties with your attorney, that's going to increase costs on liability and all kinds of things. So it's a really interesting issue, and I feel like it's getting swept under the rug. What is it, do you think, that we can do about that?
Let me address that in the next half hour.
All right. Thanks, Kevin.
All right, Joe. Thank you. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Maggie.
Good.
KIDO Talk Radio. Coming up next, our great friend Michael Sander will join us, talking about his campaign for Congress. Before that, we go to Fox News Radio's Tanya J. Powers. Tough assignment for you, all about the Avengers. You talked a little bit about it last week. Are you going to give us any more details on why not only America but the world loves this movie?
It's an Avengers movie. I mean, first of all, there's been 18 of them. It's over a 10-year span, so people are, kind of invested in this. At least the Avengers fans are, the Marvel fans, and there's a lot of them. The new movie Infinity War, by the way, this weekend, biggest opening weekend ever for a movie, $250 million domestically. It beat out Star Wars: The Force Awakens from 2015, which had $248 million. And that's domestic. We're not even talking about worldwide. Worldwide, it got an estimated $630 million at the box office, and it hasn't even opened in China yet.
Indeed. Of course, can you believe how long the Avengers have been rolling? And, of course, the sequel comes out next year.
Yes. We have to wait a year after this one to see what happens next.
So are you going to tell us the plot at all?
No. Thanos is a bad guy. I can tell you that.
Well, I can tell you're really fired up. So it was a big movie. You're not going to tell us the plot or the ending. All of a sudden, you're putting me in an uncomfortable situation here. I mean, we can go to the Snake River Stampede, but that's kind of my crutch with you. So you're going to have to guide me through this.
Okay, I can tell you that, if you're a Marvel fan, like I said, you've watched probably a good many of the movies, if not all of them, and the backstory and stuff like that. If people go to this movie, this Infinity War, and they aren't familiar or aren't that familiar with the Marvel Comics universe, so to speak, you will still be able to enjoy a good action film, and they still you'll still have a good time, and you'll still enjoy the movie. I really believe so. If you've seen, all of them or most of them, you'll really be invested in it, because there's some things in here that moviegoers probably, even despite the things, so-called spoilers that leaked out ahead of time that we are now finding out may not have really actually been spoilers. They're like red herrings, I think, in some cases. There's still going to be some surprises that will probably catch you off guard.
Well, until next time, we appreciate that, and Thanos is looking out for you.
Thanos demands your silence.
Thank you, Tanya J. Powers.
Thank you.
Let's go to Michael Snyder joining us now at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Kevin. Great to be with you.
So if you had to do it all over again, would you do it, considering we're just weeks away from the process?
Oh, absolutely, Kevin. And we were very excited. We feel like we've got a tremendous amount of momentum from the debate last night. And we didn't have to wait to hear if the debate went well for us last night or not. Immediately after it ended, our phones just exploded with people congratulating us, telling us how well it went. People were saying, Michael, this was your best debate performance by far. You killed the other guys. So we feel like this is really going to move the needle for us.
The comments of State Representative Perry, old boys, 58-year-old men, Congress. Now, you're not in your 50s.
No.
Your thoughts on the sound clip of the night?
Yeah, well, Christy Perry was trying to play the female card. I mean, basically the kind of politics that Democrats use, but this is coming from Christy Perry, who's essentially a Democrat anyway, but she really revealed her true colors. But that really wasn't the soundbite of last night, Kevin. That essentially destroyed Christy Perry's campaign, but there was something far more shocking that people are going to be talking about for a long time, on the level of, if you remember a few years ago, Rick Perry couldn't remember the agencies that he was going to abolish. Something on that level happened last night, and it was in the context of the Mueller investigation. Because Betsy Russell had asked a question, and it had gotten to me, and so I had said, basically, hey, this was a witch hunt from the beginning. We've been gone on for a year. We need to shut down this investigation, fire Robert Mueller. It needs to end. Basically, that's the correct answer for many conservatives out there. And so I gave my answer right before Russ Fulcher did. So he could have just copied my answer and been done with it. But instead, she gave the exact same question to him. And you know what? He didn't answer her question, number one. But then number two, you know what Russ Fulcher said? He said, I've not been following that closely. The Mueller investigation, which is the biggest news story in Congress for a whole year, he admitted not once, Kevin, but he said it 3 times. I went back and watched the tape last night. 3 times he said he wouldn't answer the question. He gave the reason why he wouldn't answer the question. He said, Betsy, I haven't been following that closely. He said that 3 times. How can someone running for Congress not be following or know about the Mueller investigation and then admit that on television on a debate that's being broadcast all over the state? I mean, literally jaws were dropping to the floor all over the studio when he was, and it would have been bad enough if he admitted it one time. If you go back and watch the tape, he said that 3 times, that he had not been following the Mueller investigation. I don't know how that you could do that. I don't know how his campaign can survive this, honestly, after last night. It was a moment that will go down in the history of Idaho politics as one of the biggest blunders of all time.
Boy, that's a pretty big statement from you, Michael Snyder, but we've heard that for quite some time. Playing devil's advocate with you, I mean, there are other issues besides the Mueller investigation, obviously issues that you care about, the economy, sovereignty, the wall, those sorts of issues. You really believe that answer could derail the Fulcher campaign?
Oh, without a doubt, because this is the biggest thing Congress has had to deal with for a whole year. It's been in the papers constantly. It's been the focus of. So you're talking about the biggest controversy Congress has had to deal with. You've got to have an opinion on it. You can't say, "Oh, I haven't been following that. I haven't been to say I haven't been paying attention," and to say it 3 times to literally the biggest thing Congress has been focusing on for an entire year. I honestly don't know how anybody could vote for someone for Congress after that when saying, I haven't been paying attention. And all along the narrative has kind of been from Fulcher opponents that, well, he didn't really want to be a member of Congress. He wanted to be governor. It's kind of a consolation prize for him. And then for him to admit, oh, he hasn't even been paying attention to the number one thing Congress has been dealing with. I mean, that's just going to feed into that narrative and feed into the whole thing that he's unprepared, he's uninterested, and he basically doesn't know what he's doing. And
well, it sounds like there's a runoff between you and Russ Fulcher. What about the other candidates?
Well,
how do you see the race? Do you see it between you and Russ Fulcher, or you've got David Leroy, you've got Luke Malek that's going negative on television against Russ Fulcher? I mean, there are other candidates.
Oh, there are.
You've got Alex, who just showed up out of the blue.
It's true. There are other candidates, and Luke Malek hasn't got much traction, and Dave Leroy is going to have his base here in South Idaho, more of the establishment type of crowd.
Well, he says he's more pro-Trump than you.
Well, last night, if you watched the debate last night, there's no doubt, because throughout the debate, I was making the point that I was pro-Trump, and Dave Leroy didn't even try to fight me on it, because basically he knew he kind of had to throw up his hands. He was like, but yeah, if you watch the debate, no one's going to come away with any doubt that I'm the most pro-Trump candidate, and that was very clear in the answers, specifically when you compare Dave Leroy and I, a specific answer about Trump's presidency so far. I mean, there's no debate about that any longer, that I'm the most pro-Trump candidate. But at the end of the day, Dave is in his lane. But on social media, the debate is, and I made this in my closing argument, that everyone's debating Michael Snyder versus Russ Fulcher. That's what everyone's arguing. And I last night, if anyone watches that whole debate, man, people are going to be coming over to our side in a landslide. I mean, Russ Fulcher and his team, when the debate was over, they ran for the door as quick as they could because, they knew that they got wiped out.
Well, you're in the basement of Idaho Public Television. It's not really a palatial place, though. Michael Snyder joining us here. If you have a question, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Let's get back to your unique qualifications because you live in North Idaho, you're running for Congress, and you're known more nationally as an author, as a commentator, as a social media conservative than you were inside the state. So how do you bring your national experience and your national conservatism to the 1st Congressional District?
Yeah, and that's been the challenge. For example, we just completed a 2-week tour all over the district where we are having 2 or 3 events a day in different towns, cities, some small, some big. But everywhere I went, I asked people one simple question: do you approve of the job Congress is doing? And you know what? In the whole 2-week tour, not one person raised a hand. Not one. And so what that says is that people hate Congress, because I was talking to Republican audiences, conservative audiences, but Republicans are in control in Congress. So my argument is, if we want more of the same and to do things the way they have been doing, you can pick someone like a Dave Leroy or Russ Fulcher, and nothing's going to change. But if you want to send a fireball to Congress, someone that's committed to turning the system upside down, which I am, well, then we can't have a chance at real change. And so that's part of the core of my argument to the people of Idaho.
And I caught your opening statement last night. Everybody hates Congress, and you're the one telling it like it is, and everybody else is saying, hey, I just want to join the club in Congress. Yeah. It was a fascinating point you made. More with Michael Snyder next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. KIDO Talk Radio, Michael Snyder with us, running for Congress. Let's go to the phones. Lori in Boise. Good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio.
Hello. I admire the candidates, all of them. I've met all of them, for the district, and they're all patriots and everything. I feel like Dave Leroy is really the most qualified. He's worked back in D.C. as a nuclear waste negotiator. He knows the ropes. He's been Attorney General and so on here in Idaho. But I have a concern that Mr. Snyder said he hadn't voted. He got too busy and didn't vote in November 2016 for presidential, for President Trump or in the election at all. And so, anyway, that's my take. And and also Russ Fulcher wouldn't be in this race except that Labrador decided to enter late into the race and persuaded Fulcher to drop out of the gubernatorial race. So anyway, I think Dave Leroy has a lot of qualifications. So.
All right, Lori, thank you for the call.
Thanks. Bye.
If I could just comment on that briefly, the caller said I didn't vote in the general election in 2016. That's entirely false. I very proudly voted for Donald Trump for president in the 2016 general election. And then if you go back, and I made this point last night, if you go back throughout 2016, during the Republican primaries, I was promoting Donald Trump very, very hard. You can go back and check my writing. Meanwhile, during the primaries, Dave Leroy didn't want Trump. None of the other candidates, all the other candidates were trying to keep Donald Trump out of the White House. While I was I was with Trump from the very beginning, a huge Trump supporter, promoting Trump throughout 2016. So, when the Republican race was up for grab for president, I was the only one with Trump, and I probably voted for him in November 2016. And so I just wanted to clear that up.
I think she got you confused with some of the other candidates. I mean, it all probably gets the same for a lot of folks. Let's go to Tess in Boise for Michael Snyder at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Tess.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Snyder. So, I'll just tell you a little short story. When I was a kid, I went to a carnival and I had my eye on a nice cake that was there that was frosted, and I did the cake walk worth about $2 worth. Won that cake, took it home, and when I went to cut it, it was foam. Somebody had covered that cake with foam. And I cried for about 10 seconds, and then I just laughed until I cried. So I always want to know what I'm getting,
Well, that's quite a run-up. I mean... So, Tess, if you could let us get to the question, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, one of the concerns I have is that some of these candidates, like Mr. Malik, have just extraordinary absenteeism in the legislature and have missed a lot of votes. And you don't hear much about that. And I know that moving to these other areas can be burdensome. So how do you maintain your home here in Idaho if you're elected?
I think that's a great question, and certainly my wife and I will keep our home in Bonners Ferry, but unlike a lot of members of Congress, I'm bringing my whole family. We're establishing a household out in the Washington, D.C. area. I've actually lived out in that area previously. I've experienced there, spent more time in the D.C. area than any of the other candidates, so I know what it's like out there. We're going to establish a home, but I love your analogy about, you got this great cake, you went home and it was foam, yeah. And I think that's a perfect analogy for Russ Fulcher, where, he's really being disingenuous throughout this entire thing, where once upon a time he was against Trump. Now he says he's pro-Trump, but as I made the point last night, you go to his website, look at his campaign team, it's full of never-Trumpers. So completely disingenuous to say, oh, now I'm for Trump. But his campaign team is absolutely packed with never-Trumpers. Now, if he would fire those never-Trumpers, I might be inclined to believe his conversion. But with all those never-Trumpers on his team, I really have doubts about that guy.
All right. All right, Tess, thank you for the call. We go to your biggest supporter in the area, Pro-Life, joins us now at KIDO Talk Radio. The ever-objective Pro-Life who's running for Congress, but has said on this program that if he had to vote between himself and Michael Snyder, he would vote for Michael Snyder. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, I would vote for Michael Snyder. The people asking the question, they're all liberal-oriented. In fact, the whole country is. And one of the problems is they don't want to talk about moral questions. Now, Trump said he didn't want transgenders in the military. They're being operated on by military funds. I think and then judges have overruled his decision. I'd like Michael's, comments on that.
Right. Well, I pro-life, government funds should not be going for these kinds of operations. Government funds, there's a whole lot of things, according to the U.S. Constitution, the federal government's doing that it shouldn't be doing. Government funds shouldn't be going to pay for Planned Parenthood, for things that they do either. So, I've made a pledge. I'll never vote for any bill that even has one penny of funding for Planned Parenthood. Never vote for funding for Planned Parenthood or so many of these other things the federal government is doing that it should not be doing. We are spending money on some of the most ridiculous things you can imagine. We're sending tons of money overseas, so much government waste, and it's time for a change.
Pro-Life, thank you. Cindy, we didn't get to you today. Michael Snyder, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kevin.
See you soon.
Absolutely, yeah, after we win on May 15th.
Traffic and weather together. Good morning, Dave. And we thank Ray Amaya for an outstanding job as always. We appreciate you listening. Thank you for choosing us each and every morning. May God bless you and your family. Keep the faith.